How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lumix Live. We've got a really fun interview that we pre-recorded for everybody, just due to time zone differences and stuff like that, that we're going to be playing in a little bit. So you're definitely going to want to hear that. I took some time out with Johnny Hendrikus, based down... wow. My brain is broken on where it... Anyway, we have a really fun interview with Johnny, so we're going to be talking to him about some of his work, what he does, what kind of field he's in, and the equipment that he uses. So definitely check that out. And then the second half of this stream, we're going to be doing just general AMA kind of conversation. There's been a lot of questions that I've seen come up in different platforms, as I always do. I kind of troll around on the different Facebook groups and forums and stuff to just kind of see what people are asking about, and then hopefully we can address them on these streams. So yeah, we're definitely gonna look forward to that. If you have questions that you want to get answers to during the broadcast, make sure to tag at LUMIX cameras before it, and then I will work on getting answers during this stream. In the meantime, we've had a couple of questions come in. Just remember to tag at LUMIX cameras before it. Just makes it a little bit easier for me to see them. And then, yeah, we will get going. I have to fix my microphone here because my microphone arm has decided to just not hold the mic up anymore. Cool. Yeah, so if this is the first Lumix Live that you're joining, these are the weekly broadcasts that we do every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We do a whole bunch of different stuff, from creator interviews to tech discussions to AMAs, just general hangout sessions. Yeah, this whole purpose is designed so that you and everyone that's into photography and videography has a community that you can ask questions and just actually enjoy some of the stuff that we do, and not have to necessarily always be out there trying to find an answer out in the world, where some platforms may not have people that actually know the correct answer for some things. So yeah, before we jump into the interview, I want to remind everybody about Lumix Pro services. We have Lumix Pro services Red and Platinum here in the United States. Red tier is a free program, so if you've purchased a Lumix camera, make sure to follow the QR code on the screen if you're in the US, and get yourself registered for that. You get your 3-year warranty out of the box by registering with this. It also opens up the portal, so if you ever happen to need to use service, you can go right to the Lumix team and not have to go through general tech support and stuff like that. And then if you're someone who likes to have, maybe a little bit higher level of protection and service on your equipment, that's where our Platinum series comes in. So the Platinum tier gets you all the same benefits that the Red tier does, but you get some added things like 2-day repairs with free next-day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs, so if something breaks or gets damaged, you can reach out and get a discount on the repair there. You also get annual sensor cleanings and maintenance level type stuff, so if you're someone who uses your equipment pretty hard through a season and you want to have it, kind of brushed up and maintained before your season starts again, definitely check this out. And then for those that would much rather like to speak to people on the phone instead of necessarily emailing or working through a chat system, you also get access to a member's hotline. So the links are available down in the description below, as well as on the QR code that was up on the screen before. So you can take a look at those and get yourself registered for those programs. If you're joining us outside of the US, there is a link down below for the global portal, so you can check and see if it's available in your region as well. So let's take a look and see some of these questions before we jump into the interview. I know one of them, I'm going to have to do a little bit of research while the interview's playing, and then I'll get you some answers there. But the first question came from Tim, and said, "Good morning from Northern Nevada. How's it going? I need a recommendation on a good copy lens for my G9. I have a couple of thousand paintings to copy, need a good flat field lens." So yeah, that's going to be one of the things I'm going to take a look at and see, what's available in our system and what is typically used for things like art copy. So throughout the stream, I'll get you an answer for that, Tim. Let's see here. Has anyone tried the Sigma 135? Is it any good? It's definitely going to be a question for the community. I've used some of their other primes, the 24, the 45, and then I now have a 24 to 70 2.8 from them as well for the L mount. And so far, I've really liked all those lenses, and the compatibility with the L mount's really nice too. Let's see here. Andy says, "I have an 8 to 18 and soon adding a 35 to 100 for its internal zooming and compact size. But is there any other in-between lens with constant aperture and internal zooming that I might not know? So the 35 to 100 is definitely going to be probably one of the better of the internal zooming lenses in the Micro Four Thirds realm for our system. Looking for something that's going to maybe try to cover a much larger range. As some are pointing out, you're usually not going to find internal zooming lenses with a really long focal range, because at that point the lens would have to be gigantic to keep everything kind of inside. But yeah, the only other one that would be maybe between those two, that might actually be kind of it, because the 12 to 35 does have a front, the front element does move on that. A lot of 24 to 70 field of view lenses typically do. But I'll take a look at the lenses while we're in the interview, and then kind of see if I can come up with a good recommendation for you, Andy. Let's see here. Any of those others? Good afternoon, Sacred. Cool. All right. Yeah. So let's jump into the interview, and yeah, we'll come back in a few minutes. Thank you, Johnny, for joining us. Can you give the viewers a bit of kind of like a history and backstory as to who you are and what kind of content and stuff you produce?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sean, for having me along. It's a real privilege to be here today and be a part of the LUMIX community. Yeah, I'm Johnny Hendrikus. I come from New Zealand. I'm a creator in New Zealand. I've been a passionate LUMIX user since the GH4, so probably knocking on the door of about 5 years now. Got my first camera as a GH4. Started shooting like 21sts and sort of little almost like freebie promotional videos here and there. That was in the days of no stabilization and quite sort of a bit of a shaky hand, really embracing the ninja walk. But a couple of years later, they dropped the GH5, and that was an absolute game changer for content creation. It took me a couple of years to actually get it, because obviously you're still sort of trying out, fresh out of uni, bloody poor as anything. So, we're trying to save up those pennies to get that GH5, but the GH5 with the 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8, that was an absolute weapon for the time that camera came out. So, yeah, it was good fun. I've now moved on to the S5, which seems to be the workhorse. I'm shooting lots of content in sport. I work with a lot of athletes, weddings, which are a lot of fun. But I think moving more into this like digital realm, especially in the likes of Instagram, there is a real need for content creation for businesses and for the likes of athletes, personal brands across the board. So it's really opened up quite a lucrative sort of job and occupation for creators like myself.
Yeah. So hey, have you found, like, with that like kind of shift, like you're saying with social content and stuff like that, have you found that there's in general with the customers, are they expecting certain types of content from you? And by that I mean, like, vertical content, horizontal content. Like, has the mix shifted over the years that you've been working?
Significantly. And I think when you first start out, we're all victim of this. We really embrace the horizontal video, the beautiful letterboxing, the wide lenses, the 35 millimeter, and it really captures sort of everything in frame, and you can just do so much with it. But yeah, as social media progresses and as we want bloody more real estate on our bloody phone screens, we're going to have to turn that camera all the way around into horizontal. So mostly, I would almost say 98% of the content that I've shot in the last 3 years has all been vertical, and it's hard to shift from that, because we sort of embrace the cinematic of the whole thing, and that is part of the whole fun of it. But in order for us to make a buck, we're going to bloody flip that thing around the other side and sort of start using it like this. So.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I mean, the what am I? I'm about 7 years working with Panasonic now, and seeing that transition. The early days, like you mentioned, GH4, GH5, when those cameras launched, it was all about the idea of democratizing cinematography for the everyday user that wants to break in but isn't going to go spend $10,000-$20,000 on a cinema camera. And now we're in this phase where it's like all of that is the core. We all know that. We all respect it, but just turn it 90 degrees, and no matter how much some of us hate it or like it hurts part of us internally, it's like that's where the money's coming from, so you kind of have to do it.
That's it.
So have you found like with shooting style, how you put together an idea for a piece, or the actual process of going on site and filming something? Have you found a change in your style and the way you approach jobs now that the vertical filming is more prevalent these days?
It definitely comes with with the way that a vertical video is presented, and how people watch it. Videos nowadays are like they're really top heavy. You're kind of putting all your best shots like right at the beginning, trying to keep your audience on the screen and watching for a longer period of time. So, I think there's less. I mean, it's not so much that there's less sort of time for the storytelling. You just got to be a bit more sort of, I don't know, you just got to be a bit more creative about it, where you got to really establish your story kind of like right at the beginning in order to keep people in there, to keep people watching. So I think sort of when you're on set, you are kind of, I mean, it depends how your set goes and sort of what sequence you kind of film sort of stuff. I'm quite run and gun, I think, with a few of the kind of like the work that I do. Yeah. Especially say with like working with athletes, like I guess there's no narrative straight away with working with athletes. So you're trying to sort of shoot a whole lot of content and then piece something together in post, trying to find that story, or you might link it up with an interview that you might get with them after, and they might not necessarily say that core piece right at the beginning. So it's quite sort of unstructured in that sense, and a lot of that structure comes within the post-production.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be the traditional storyboarding ideas for a horizontal deliverable piece that is that more cinematic mentality of here's the start, here's the hook, here's the the ending or a twist or whatever like that. Social media seems to just be kind of flipping that around, that like the hook has to be right up front to keep them engaged past that. Like, what is it? Like, first 5 seconds, you need to keep them engaged before they'll actually stick around and watch the rest of it. So, when it comes to like the delivery side of it, do you find that while vertical is obviously a bulk of what clients are asking for, are you still producing more traditional outlet formatted content for them?
I think there's still a space, obviously, for that long form content for the likes of YouTube, and for the likes of, say, like brand sort of hero pieces. I was lucky to do a piece a couple of months ago with Beef and Lamb New Zealand, and it was like a 3-4 minute video. It was all about the story of the chef, why he uses this particular beef and lamb, sort of where it comes from, and having this other kind of renowned chef here in New Zealand in the kitchen with him, and they're kind of creating this beautiful degustation menu, and it's all about sort of the ingredients and about sort of the process and that sort of stuff. And you really need that longer time to be able to tell that story. And for them, that was more of almost like a branding piece. So it's a piece that would live on YouTube, but would live on their website, and typically their website would be viewed like on a computer. So you've got that kind of vertical, that that horizontal sort of landscape. But yeah, I mean those jobs are like, I feel like the 1 in 100 nowadays. So I really embraced that. That was awesome. I shot all of that using both the GH6 and the LUMIX X5, and I shot it at it was like a 4K. I think it was like the 4K 100 uncompressed. I think that was one of my first videos I did, just as that new firmware update came on the GH6, where you could film natively into the SSD. So it's just so nice to edit on, like Premiere Pro. It's super fast, heaps of room to color grade and all that kind of stuff. Definitely probably one of my favorite videos I've made to date.
Yeah, it's cool seeing like all the hardware tech, you know, kind of really supporting now these different avenues and hopefully making, you know, the editing side and even the capture side a little bit more streamlined for a lot of us. I mean, it still surprises me that it's taken this long for a mirrorless style camera. So not the cinema oriented cameras, but the mirrorless style cameras to actually start offering like ProRes internally and, you know, like the SSD recordings. I mean, I know back from like the GH5 era, when we first launched that camera, I know a lot of us were hoping that we'd be able to do SSD recording on that platform, but, you know, unfortunately, tech at the time wasn't really there on the platform we worked on. So that's for anyone watching, that's why like a GH5 and the 5 Mark II and the platforms before the GH6 just aren't going to support SSD recording. But you know, with the GH6, I'm curious, have you played around with the open gate recording functionality on that camera at all yet?
Not so much, and you know what? You're gonna hate me for this, but I probably couldn't even define what open gate is.
No,
even.
that's perfectly normal with a lot of the stuff. You know, we've gone through a lot of these changes in how cameras in this kind of world, so the mirrorless cameras, you know, have always been thought of, and right now we're trying from a technical perspective to actually shift some of that mindset, you know, to the point you made before, that a lot of the work coming in is now, you know, being requested for vertical delivery. We saw this a couple of years ago in the lead up with GH series cameras and stuff by including and pushing pretty hard the anamorphic functionality with our cameras. And since we can record the full sensor height and width for any single video, and in the GH6 it'll be 5.8K, we've actually found this pretty cool foothold of users that are like, well, you know, the client A is asking me to do vertical and horizontal for the same project. So we've now built in the ability to do full sensor height and width at 5.8K, which gets you a vertical 4K and a horizontal 4K, and users only have to shoot it once. So over the last couple of months, it's been interesting seeing another shift happen in some of that filming, because yeah, you know, you take an S5 and we can hold it vertically and put the information in there, but if we're able to do it this way and still get that, there's been a couple instances I've seen where people have been super stoked about having that. So it's always curious to find, you know, anyone that's actually out there, you know, creating content, seeing or knowing if there are some of these capabilities available in the camera. So yeah.
Is open gate is that full sensor reader? Is that like a okay. Yeah, I have used that function. Yeah. I just know it as 5.7K. I think it's just 5.8, 5.7.
Yeah. And it's I think going to be pretty interesting over the next couple of years. I honestly think you're going to see a bigger push now to cameras that come out that are designed to record that full sensor height and width, and then push the cropping later on. Do that in post, you know, just by masking out whatever region you want to deliver of. And I think one of the newer updates for the GoPros, I think, even has now a taller sensor than the previous ones because of a lot of this logic. So yeah, it's a fun little tip for everyone out there that may have not understood what open gate was.
And I'm interested to see if you know, the likes of LUMIX or sort of some camera companies start to embrace some of the vertical within just their HUD and like what you kind of see on screen. You know, are we going to start seeing it so it can be kind of flipped vertically, or, you know, maybe they come up with a sensor that, I don't know, somehow does this kind of flip thing inside. Who knows? I don't know. I'm really excited to see the shift to that, because it does. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting space to be in, especially developing technology like this.
Oh yeah, Yeah, and so with obviously all the technical side and stuff like that, I'm curious. You mentioned before that I think you said the Chef project you shot with S5 and GH6. What does your typical kit look like when you're going out for a job like that? Like, what kind of, like, do you have preferred like microphones and camera setup and lenses and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I mean, let's just jump straight into the cameras because that's the that's the fun stuff. But yeah, S5, this S5 just, yeah, man, it's just so good. This with the 24 to 70 f2.8, like, I think with the full frame sensor, you can ride this thing up to 5,000, 6,000 ISO and hardly break a sweat in terms of like the grain, especially on video, eh? So I think just having that freedom of being able to, especially run and gun, having the 24 to 70, if it's a wide shot you can go wide, you can go all the way to 70. If you want to sort of get a little bit more compression, and you've got the ability with the 2.8, so you get some really nice sort of bokeh in the background. So for me, this is the stalwart in my camera kit. This thing right here with that lens, and equally just as important is getting some really good quality SD cards. So I've actually been rocking the Sony Tough cards just because they're one piece of plastic, super hard. You're taking them in and out all the time. I've had situations where I've had some SanDisk cards and stuff, like 2-piece cards where they've cracked on the side, and yeah, like I haven't lost anything, but it just increases that risk. So I think really investing in good quality solid SD cards and memory cards is like uber important.
Yeah.
In terms of like microphones and stuff, yeah, I think I'm just rocking. What am I rocking at the moment? I think I've just got like these like Sony lapel mics, nothing special. Got a Rode shotgun mic, which so for that chef setup, I had what did I have? I think I had the GH6 on a syrup genie. I just set that to this really like subtle pan, so it might have taken, I think the genie was about, I don't know, 40 centimeters, 50 centimeters long, and I set it so it would move from here to here in about like 2 minutes, or like a minute to 2 minutes. So it just got this really subtle, movement. Actually, it was the S5 because I had the 85 mil on it, so it was punched real close, and then this real subtle zoom. It just gave this, it kind of just moved the background while keeping like the face kind of in shot. So it just kind of adds this dynamic shot you can cut to, especially for like an interview situation. Yeah. And then the GH6, I just had the was it like the 12 to 105, I think, on that. I think I might have been punched in about at maybe like 50 mil or something. But that was cool. That was I was really proud of that whole setup. That was probably one of my better interview setups I think I've ever done. And just getting that syrup genie and getting these dynamic shots, that was just far out. That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a piece of equipment. I think a lot of people that have been just doing kind of interview style work, or kind of just, I guess, like cookie cutter style content, where it's like you show up, you do the job, you're done, you peace out, like, and it's fairly straightforward. It always amazes me how much a slider with something like you said, like a short little distance move, how much more interesting that makes the shot, and how much more the client tends to look at it and go, oh, that looks awesome, I love that.
Well, you see it, I know, because I was heavily inspired by Chef's Table on Netflix with that slider, and obviously the beginning. I don't know if you watched much Chef's Table, but right at the beginning of, I think, one particular kind of like season of it, they're just running all these hyperlapses or time lapses on sliders in the kitchen, and you've got the chefs that are running around, and it's moving through food, and it's just really busy and really fast. It's like, shit, I got to get me one of those sliders. I just hide it. But yeah, you quite often see them use those kind of sliders as well in just interview situations, because it just gives, it's just more movement, isn't it? It's just more movement, more energy. It doesn't stop the flow of the video because it's constantly moving.
Yeah. I think now we've gotten to such a cool point that the camera that you're using, the quality that just comes out of them, it really now just comes to how do you add like, your personal flair to the content you want to make? What do you do that's that extra level up? Because the camera is going to be capable of recording basically whatever you put in front of it, as long as you know the basics of exposure and, the normal things that either people go to school for or you learn on, in the field and, but some of the capabilities I've seen with B-roll that people are creating for, these kind of in the field interviews, it's like next level, the creativity that is coming out these days. And, with working in a situation like that, like the interviewing a chef and stuff like that, how do you approach that kind of shooting style with like lighting and stuff like that? Are you typically looking more at like the natural lighting that's in the space, or are you someone that likes to go up there and fully light the whole scenario up?
I'm a bit of both. I think primarily I run hot on natural lighting, but I do rock of it. Actually using that right now. Just really twist the camera and see what we got. It's one of these with the lantern, and it's a what am I rocking? It's like a Amaran 300X or something like that.
Yeah.
But I pretty much take that along just to give me a bit more sort of like natural light. Use it for things like this. Kind of, I think with the lantern, it sort of brings this really like nice sort of round sort of light to it, and it's quite sort of natural with the way our head shapes are and that sort of stuff. So
yeah,
usually use one of those. Same with like product photography and stuff. Got more of like a longer light box that kind of sits down, great for sort of product photography and product videos and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that I pretty much just rock that one light. Sometimes I've got some cool like creative lights that got the RGB sort of things you might chuck in the background.
Yeah,
a little bit like what you've got. In the background. Gives a little bit of something, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like
but I think, to touch on your point, that you made before around being able to shoot sort of creatively in the field and take some of these creative shots and B-roll to match up with these interviews. I think there's the one thing that especially the G series from the GH5 and the GH6. With those variable frame rates and those slow motion modes and that sort of thing, like the GH6, you can punch a 4K 100 frames per second, and it's like beautiful, just crispy, clean footage that you can edit and cut, and it just retains so well. Working with athletes and working with things that are moving really fast, you're passing balls and kicking balls and the running and the sweating and all that sort of thing. A camera like that, it helps your creativity. It gives you these options, and it allows you to carve out a bit of a style for yourself, a point of difference compared to other sport content, that you might see.
Yeah. There's, I was surprised at how much the, like 4K 100 and 120 frames per second, and even honestly the full HD 240, how much content I'm seeing in like all the different platforms, like on Instagram and Facebook and all the different groups, how creative people can be by using, like capturing the masterpiece in like, 4K 100 or 4K 120 if you're in the US, like recording that, but then still like getting those awesome speed ramps that before really seemed like it was a lot more difficult to do with like variable frame rate, with the more limited, bit rates and stuff like that. But now it does seem a lot more fun, and some of the stuff that I've played around with it, and I am by no means anywhere near the level of anyone that I ever have on this stream for video capabilities, but like even just playing around with it, it's pretty addicting to play around with 120 and then like, do a bunch of speed ramps and just get some really cool stuff. Granted, I basically only film my dog running around, which that's always fun. He's a blue heeler, so he's fast and super energetic. Yeah. But
But how
Yeah.
cool does it look? How cool does that dog look when he's running? Like, you can see every detail of his face, like, move. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so with like all the shooting and the videos and the photos and stuff like that, I've wanted to start getting into asking everyone that comes on, like, when it comes time for your editing side, what kind of software do you prefer? Like, have you run the gamut of all the different programs out there and settled on one that you kind of like working with?
yeah, there seems to be this battle between what Premiere and what's the other one? The Black Magic.
Resolve.
Resolve. Oh my gosh, it's a battle between Premiere and Resolve, and everybody that uses Resolve is like, man, it's like so much better than Premiere. It's like so much faster, so much better. It's free, blah 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 blah. And I've looked at it, and I can see why. And apparently Resolve's meant to be like really solid with its color grading, and it's all node based and all that sort of thing. That's what they keep saying. It's all node based. But I think when you start off, like when I first started doing video editing and that sort of thing, I started off in Final Cut Pro. Started off in iMovie actually. Started off in iMovie, and then you go to Final Cut Pro, which is kind of like iMovie on crack, and then you kind of go from Final Cut to Premiere, and it's quite sort of the same. So
Yeah.
and I think once you, especially with Premiere, like you can jump into Photoshop and you could edit some sort of title, and then you can save it out, and then it would straight away change it into Premiere as well. Same with After Effects. Like there's that crossover between being able to use After Effects and Premiere Pro, and it all kind of syncs up and it all kind of edits together. So I haven't been able to break out of that sort of Adobe cycle yet, but it's still good. But it does have its qualms, and it can crash every now and again, and it can do this and do that, and it's limited in this thing and that kind of thing, but it gets the job done at the end of the day. It gets the job done, and so definitely Premiere Pro. And I think the biggest learning I think I've had, especially as these new cameras are coming out, is like the difference between the computer's ability to be able to read compressed footage. And I think I've especially noticed it with the GH6. I don't know what they did different, but especially with the GH6, the compressed footage on an SD card, especially like the 100 frames 10-bit 4K, like how well that scrubs and reads in Premiere Pro. I've had like just 10-bit 4K 50 frames, say, from the S5, and you can still get the job done. But yeah, for some reason what they've done with the GH6, the compression, the decompression rather, on the computer, it just seems to read it really well.
Yeah, and that's honestly a lot of the thought process that goes into what kind of codecs are chosen when we're developing a camera, and why there's a very large vocal group of filmmakers out there that would love to see things like 422 10-bit in the HEVC compression that we use on the cameras. And Panasonic's stance has always been, like when we provide a camera that has varying different codecs and combinations, there's a lot of thought that goes into, well, what is the most prevailing computer hardware out there? What is it that Apple is able to very easily, kind of work with natively, and you don't really need a whole lot of extra, overhead to support these kind of more specialized codecs and stuff like that, or compression styles. And same even in the Windows ecosystem. And up until recently, there's really not been any support for stuff like 422 10-bit with an HEVC compression, I think, up until like the new M2 or M1 MacBooks that came out. And while that's cool because you get that little extra level of chroma subsampling and you're still getting the better compression for HEVC or H.265, stuff like that, it does manifest that point where some of those files are still really hard to work with on the computer. So for the vast majority of the stuff that we've chosen in a lot of the Lumix cameras, there's a reason why our HEVC compressions are always 420 10-bit. It's that almost any piece of hardware that's out there that's come out in the last 5 years for graphics cards, for general PC decoding or MacBooks and stuff like that, they've caught up to the point now where those are editable formats, even though for anyone that's been around in the industry long enough, they probably know that HEVC wasn't really ever meant as a capture format. It was a deliverable format for like Netflix and stuff like that. So, but yeah, to the point you're saying, like, you know, there is a lot of thought in what codecs are delivered in the camera with that mindset of that it has to be relatively easy to work with and edit when you're sitting in post. So yeah, not spending hours and hours waiting for it to render and all that fun stuff.
Spinning wheel of death.
Oh yeah.
Gosh. It's fun being a videographer.
Yeah, right? All of us photographers actually now pretty much have it fairly easy when it comes to how we can process our photos.
Oh, Lightroom, no problem. Lightroom just it hits the mark 100% of the time.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, I this has been such a fun conversation. I love these, you know, these just casual chats and just getting to know you a little bit better. You know, we've had the opportunity to speak a number of times over the last year or so, and you know, having you on LUMIX Live is super fun. But you know, for everyone that's tuned in, that's watching the interview, where can they find you? Where can they follow you? If you know they want to check out more of your work.
Absolutely. Primarily on the gram at Johnny_Hendrikus. I post most of my work there, video, photo, and then if I'm posting stuff elsewhere, it's usually on YouTube, in which I'll probably link to the gram anyway. So you kind of you'll end up sort of getting there just by going to the gram side. All the eggs are in the one basket at the moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, definitely, and the links for your channels will be down in the description as well. But yeah, so is there anything fun coming up that you're excited about filming that you want to tease people about or anything like that? Or
I mean, at the moment I've just got another wedding coming up. I've got a couple of just small products, sort of product jobs here and there. I've got a cologne, a local cologne or perfume making company that we've just bought a nice like clear perspex box. I spent $200 on this just clear piece of perspex. Like, what am I doing? So we can put backgrounds and textures underneath it and kind of shoot in water with these with these perfumes and colognes and stuff. So hopefully come up with a some video content and some cool photos for that. So I reckon that's probably number one on the agenda. For the most part, it's just keeping out of the trouble. It's keeping warm here in New Zealand, and yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah, thank you again so much for taking the time and joining me. I know it's early there for you, but yeah, this was super fun. I flat out, these are some of the most fun that I have, is just sitting here BSing with other creators out there and just having a fun conversation. So
100%. Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sean. And yeah, this has been awesome.
Cool. So yeah, thank you, Johnny, again for sitting down with me and having a conversation. It's a lot of fun getting to actually hear like the background from some different creators out there. So hopefully y'all picked up some cool insight from there. And I encourage everyone to go take a look at Johnny's work. He's got some really, really cool stuff out there over on his websites. Links are down in the description below. So you can check him out on Instagram and over on his YouTube channel as well. So let's see here. We're gonna shift right into the AMA section of the stream today. So let's go back here, see some of the questions that have come in. One of the questions: when will there be Capture One support for the GH6? So I did answer this in the chat. There is support for the raw files in Capture One. It kind of depends on what level of integration you're looking for. If you want things like tethering and use of like the different color profiles that we make, I do not believe they have that in there. That's completely up to Capture One to add. So if that's something that you are really looking forward to, the more people that let them know, the higher the likelihood that they're going to add it into their software for that level. So yeah. Blue Strike asked, is the S5 anamorphic mode open gate? So during the interview, we talked about open gate recording and the full sensor height and width. And I think there's maybe a little bit of self-imposed confusion over the last couple of years now that things are starting to kind of shift out to where anamorphic became kind of commonplace explanation of open gate recording or using the full sensor height and width, especially in cameras like the GH6 where we can do this from the full sensor height and width and still record in an quote-unquote anamorphic mode. But on a number of cameras up until recently, you see that the anamorphic modes in full-frame cameras typically are regulated down into the Super 35 region, mainly because the vast majority of lenses that are commonly used in anamorphic applications are only designed to cover Super 35 sensors. We're seeing more and more of them come out that are covering a full 35mm sensor, which does change the aspect ratios you get out in the end depending on the D-squeeze of the lens. But as we've kind of just been evolving our anamorphic modes and the technology's been catching up as far as the hardware required to use a full sensor height and width of a 35mm sensor, you start to see more and more options available. Like currently the S1H is the camera if you want to be able to shoot in an open gate mode where you're using full sensor height and width. The S1H is the one that can do it in 6K at 24 frames per second, so 23976. And then you go down into the GH6 if you want to be able to do higher frame rates at about the same resolution. Because the smaller sensors allow you to read out much faster, which is lower instances of rolling shutter and so on and so forth. So there are options, but open gate seems to be the kind of next realm that a lot of video functionality is going to start pushing harder into. And you can see that with the way we've been developing the cameras. Again, I talk a lot about the GH6 in this case because it is kind of like the camera in the lineup right now that really shows you what's possible as far as these different kinds of areas that you can expand out in videography and cinematography with. It is on our totally new engine, so this is the platform that we're building on moving forward. It is a totally new sensor, so all that kind of stuff. So open gate will become, kind of more and more commonplace. Would be probably my best guess on this. But yeah, as it sits now, if you were to record in a technically, yes, it can be open gate in the anamorphic mode because it really just means that you're recording in a higher, a taller sensor region than your output's going to be. So technically you can call it open gate on an S5, but that's still why we call it anamorphic on that particular camera. Let's see here. Is the other questions? Sacred says, Adobe can handle ProRes RAW. DaVinci is better for color grading, so it's like Civil War of editing. I wish DaVinci Resolve could do ProRes RAW, but they hate Apple. I'm not sure if they hate Apple, but having ProRes RAW would be really, really cool to see in more software applications, and that's more of that stuff. Why, as you, the actual users of this equipment, the more you demand these kind of features from software companies and stuff like that, the more likely you are to see them get added over time, because that's really what helps drive kind of the direction and the support is what is the the options that are being used most. So let's see here. Brooks says, I fit my S1 on an RS2 with the Ninja 5 with both HDMI cables and the camera control, and I lose camera LCD, so I can't access the menu. Any ideas? So we've talked about this before on the stream. Not all of the cameras, some of the cameras, when you have the USB control attached, it disables the in-camera display because the controller that's attached is using that image pipeline and that information pipeline. So that's just the way those systems work. If you need the rear screen information, you basically wouldn't be able to have the USB attached while running HDMI out at the same time. Andy, I was about to buy that. Okay, so you guys are talking about the 25-50, which is a really solid lens. But yeah, that lens is also... That lens is closer to, I think, what you were looking for, Andy, but it is definitely a much larger lens, but it is also a lot faster of a lens for that period there. Andy says, is there any change that a pixel-to-pixel mode for photos would be added to the GH6 as a way to deliver faster results without entering an editing software and cropping manually? So we've asked about, kind of doing an in-camera where you can do pixel-to-pixel for stills. I don't know where those conversations have kind of ended, but I know that it does create some challenges by doing that, because the camera has to downsample the image, or you have to actually pixel-to-pixel crop in for that. And pixel-to-pixel crop in would be challenging to figure out how far in do you want to go, because a still image at 25 megapixels is the whole sensor. So some of that does kind of get a little challenging to figure out, what would be the right punch-in for this. There used to be, on some of the other cameras, you used to be able to do like the EX teleconverter modes and stuff like that, which would allow you to punch in. And in some cases you still can with the cameras, but from a stills perspective, it kind of just gets into that area where there are so many variables for doing a punch in, especially in a Micro Four Thirds sensor for a still side capture, that a lot of feedback needs to be gained to determine what punch in on the sensor would be the most like desired, I guess, aspect ratio, or the punch in would be. So it's a fairly complicated question to kind of be able to figure out and see what would make the most sense for it. Let's see here. JC says, are the other Samsung T7 drives compatible with the GH6 for the SSD recording like the T7 Shield is? So the T7 Shield is not formally verified on the GH6 yet. It is under validation for it. My understanding is that it's going to be the T7 Shield series. The earlier T7s, just because the Shield variant kind of gets the stamp of approval, does not mean that the older versions will as well, because it comes down to what kind of controllers are used in that particular drive, and what kind of NAND flash is used. So there are some differences, even if the model names are the same. So if you want the ultimate reliability of, making sure that when we say, like, this is the mode that the camera works with, this is the accessory that it works with, that chart is going to be your best friend. Again, that's not to say that you can't use drives that are not on that list. However, you may run into some anomalies because of either what kind of memory controllers the company used in those particular models versus the ones that are on the approved list. Those are just the challenges that you kind of run into with that so far. So let's hear. Alan says, we've invested in some EF lenses so we can adapt to both MFT and in the future L mount. Any loss of quality adapting Sigma EF to L versus their native L mounts? Wish L could be adapted to MFT. So adapting from Sigma EF mounts onto an L mount versus the L mount version of those lenses, you shouldn't see any difference in image quality or anything like that. The biggest thing that you lose when you do that is continuous focus. If you use the rebuilt versions of those lenses that are native L mount, you do get continuous focus. Now to remember though, EF mount lenses that were designed from Sigma before the L mount became the standard for the different manufacturers, those motors were designed for phase detect systems, and they were designed back in the DSLR style era, which used an entirely separated phase differential system, and it wasn't on sensor. So it's one of the downsides when you move from an older style technology for focus motor controllers to a newer, faster system that's recording at 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second. Older lenses tend to be noisier on the newer cameras because the motors are working in ways that they may not have necessarily been designed for originally. So like if you want the like kind of best quality and you're looking in some of the Sigma lenses, you would look at the DGDN series. Those are the lenses that are designed, for mirrorless cameras. So the focus motors are a little different. Like I have the 105 macro here. And they're going to be the native mount for the system. I've used the converted lens, modernized EF version lenses on L mount before, and I've liked them. They have some really nice, well-dampened manual focus rings on them. So if you're going to be doing manual focus with those lenses, they're nice and pretty straightforward. The new DGDN series, they play very nice with our L mount lens offering. So I do have a couple of those as well that I kind of bounce back and forth. But it's usually only in the more specialized lenses, like the macro and stuff. Since we don't have a macro in L mount at this time, the Sigma's been my go-to when I need some macro work, and it performs really well on it. So, yeah, I would recommend using the DGDN series if you're looking in Sigma for that. Let's see here. JC, I'm having an issue seeing and controlling my BGH1 Ethernet and GH6 USB at the same time in Lumix Tether. Only one camera can be seen and controlled. JC, yeah, this is something that I've been digging into to see if there are limitations between a USB controlled versus an Ethernet or network controlled camera. I just have not gotten an answer back yet. I've had a couple other things come up that I've had to work on in the meantime, because I think you had asked that last week or the week before. But it is something I'm still looking into. Currently, my understanding is that it's either networked controlled cameras or USB controlled cameras and not mixing the two of them. But I will get a better confirmation for you shortly. Pete says, what are you using today? The quality is incredible video. I'm using the same camera that I use pretty much every single week. It's the BS1H with the 35mm f1.8 at, I think I'm at f1.8. I might be at f2. So yeah, that's the system that I use for this. And I pipe that HDMI into a Elgato 4K Pro PCI capture card. And then, yeah, we send it into YouTube. Probably the biggest difference from a number of streams ago is that we broadcast out in 4K 60p now. Since I was lucky enough to get a much better internet provider that actually supplies enough bandwidth to do this. So that means we get to take advantage of YouTube's better compression and delivery algorithms on YouTube. So if you're viewing these streams, check it out. Viewing it in 4K, the quality looks much better than the 1080 quality that we used to be streaming out in. Let's see here. Alan says, been using the 70-200 and the 100-600 Sport DG OS HSM, if that counts. Those are... So the 70-200 and the 100-600 DG series, those would be the EF versions. Yeah, they're great lenses. I think the 100-600 is the only one that has a DGDN version, although that might be the 150-600. But yeah, if you look on the lens, you'll actually see in the naming on the side, it'll actually say DGDN. And that's just the indicator for their the newer series of the lenses. So, let's see here. Super Zero would like to see a weather sealed Nocticron. So would I. It is one of my more favorite lenses. I do have the optic path tattooed. I forget which one it is. I think that's it. So that is the actual Nocticron's optical arrangement. So it is one of my more favorite lenses. So yeah, if there was an update for that, that would be really cool. Let's see here. Scholarhead says, will there ever be an update on the XLR1 adapter with 32-bit audio recording maybe? Not that I'm aware of. It has been asked. I know that there seems to be this groundswell for information about 32-bit float audio. I don't know of any camera manufacturer that's deploying it internally. I think it is just primarily external audio devices. But at this point, the XLR1 adapter is still pretty much the standard that we use for it. So that's 96 kilohertz, 24-bit is what you can get out of that guy. I wouldn't ever say no to an update. I just don't know how much of a likelihood I would put on that update for it. JC says, I've tested using a condenser mic XLR to 3.5 millimeter to my BGH1, and with power on through mic settings, the mic doesn't work. Is phantom power different from the power sent to a mic in the LUMIX? There are some microphones that, depending on how you're getting them connected to it, the power that they're drawing may be higher than what the box cameras put out, or any of the LUMIX cameras put out over the power mic selection. That's where I know, like, if you plug in some of those microphones into like the XLR1, they'll work, but maybe not necessarily into the 3.5. I'm not educated enough to really know the details behind it, but my first guess would be probably something to do with the fact that you're converting from XLR to 3.5. That could be causing a problem. For the vast majority of things, I mean, I've even run into it with the setup I've got here for LUMIX Live before I used the Rode mic that they so graciously sent over to me. Before I was using this, I used an XLR to 3.5 through the ATEM Mini, and even that was fickle with what microphone would work, which one, you know, like what kind of noise levels I was getting through it. So I've always just been a big proponent of don't adapt if you don't have to, if there's options available that get you around adapting microphones. Yeah, that's usually this kind of the bigger thing that I've pushed there. Phantom power is usually 48 volt, whereas plug-in power supplied by camera is usually about 5 volt. There you go. Perfect answer from Alan. This is what I love about the community. Y'all know some stuff like that I would never know, so having that kind of stuff would be super cool. Having that stuff in the community is awesome. Richard says 32-bit float audio support would be amazing. It would be pretty cool. From what I understand of it, it does give you a lot more flexibility to save things in post and correct things, at least from the video that I watched from Photo Joseph about it. But yeah, as far as cameras including it, again, I'm honestly not sure of any camera company that would endeavor into doing 32-bit float internally. I think it's just a matter of, you know, needs versus where the hardware is to be supported to actually build into cameras. Obviously, newer technology, 32-bit isn't really new. Stuff like that can take more time to actually just kind of develop and properly integrate. So a lot of times that usually falls behind in camera development. Like, it was only more recently that you saw, like, our cameras, well, recently. In the grand scheme of how long we've been building cameras, it is more recently that you've seen that we've added plug-in power versus things like phantom power if you go to an XLR1 adapter and things like that. So yeah, sometimes those things just take a little bit longer. Red Frame Tech says, if you use a mic that needs phantom power, plug-in power, it's not going to be enough. Okay, yeah. Lumix Super Zero says, what are the Venus engine processor power differences between the GH5 Mark II and the GH6? So as far as the actual details of the processors themselves, that is stuff that is unfortunately not public knowledge. So we don't really share much about that, other than what I can tell you is that the newer processor that we use for the GH6 is a totally different design and totally new system. And that will be the basis moving forward for cameras that we build, you know, kind of in the future. That new processor is what's allowed us to do things like the punch-in while recording, the faster frame rate functionality, the better processing that we're doing on things like the GH6 with dynamic range boost functionality. It's what allows us to do a lot of these cool things, like even down into stuff like the USB SSD recording and stuff like that. All of that comes from the hardware increases that we've done and the massive changes that we've made generationally from the previous processors we used to the new generations ones that we developed and deployed. So yeah, it's a lot more powerful, let's put it that way, than what was originally in a GH5 Mark II. And that's not to say that the GH5 Mark II's processor is a slouch at all. It is still, obviously, it's still one of the higher regarded ones because of all the functionality that we can do in the cameras that no one else really is doing. So things like Open Gate and stuff like that. The GH6, the newer processors, just really that next level and the next evolution of what we can do moving forward. So, JC, can you make a flash cable to 3.5 millimeter cable for the GH6 for jam sync timecode like Tentacle Sync, or is there one out already from third party? We don't make anything like that, so for stuff like that, that's well beyond what my electrical engineering understanding is on how you could do stuff like that. I know that there are solutions that will just let you plug into a 3.5 and it will work through the audio track. Or depending on the camera, if you're working on GH6, you've got timecode in through the PC sync port, so you already do have that capability. You don't have to use the audio channel for that. Let's see here. Let's go ahead. If I film in APS-C mode on my Lumix S1, I'll have less dynamic range than full frame 4K or worse colors. I use it because of the great rolling shutter in APS-C mode. So no, you're not going to have less dynamic range or like worse colors. What happens there is that it's the difference between if you were to shoot a project in say with the S1 sensor, it's a 6K wide sensor. So you have about 6K in resolution width-wise. So when you're doing 4K from full sensor width, you're taking that 6K image and then you're downsampling it into 4K, which means it's recorded here. Output in 4K means that your noise looks smaller because you've downsampled. When you do pixel to pixel or you shoot in an APS-C crop mode or Super 35, you're recording closer to the actual 3840 by 2160, so there's less downscaling, which means noise is going to be maybe a little more present than in the oversampled versions or super sampled no, not super sampled. I think it's oversampled. So that's like the kind of differences that you'll see. If you were to take, side by side, you'll see a little more noise in 4K 60 than you would in 4K 30 from full sensor width. But as far as dynamic range goes and stuff like that, you're not really going to see a major difference between them. And any difference that is shown is going to be down to more noise versus the actual dynamic range that can be captured. If that makes sense. It's a very loose way to describe that. But as far as even if you had to match images from the Super 35 region to full frame, you're not really going to have any issues matching them because color profiles are going to be the same. You may just do some slight noise treatment to some of the, to the crop version of it versus the non-crop version, or you may actually want to add a little bit of kind of grain or something to all of it to kind of normalize it, because when you go super clinical in some things, that's where you run into actually things may not look 100% right. You actually may want to add some texture to images, even if they're ultra clean, just to give it a little bit more bite. Since everyone typically likes to make things look a lot more filmic, when you make things look ultra clinical, it tends to be a little jarring without having some sort of kind of texture to it. And there's a really good video on YouTube. I cannot remember the name of the person that filmed it, but they explained about how when you watch movies on any kind of compressed streaming service, there is noise added to the footage. It's not super clean because the streaming compressions actually look better when you add some noise versus making things ultra clean and ultra clinical, because compression can actually destroy some of that, and streaming compression does that. So adding a little bit of a grain or kind of noise effect in post actually can make your footage look infinitely better than if you go ultra super clinical clean. Let's see here. Alan says, something I wondered a while back was if it would be possible to use an Ethernet adapter with the pass-through PD power to control the GH5 Mark II. Has that been looked at? It has been looked at. Unfortunately, it is not possible. If you're using the mode of operation for that port is either going to be Ethernet or USB or power. So you're basically, those are the modes of operation that the system works in. So you can't do parallel kind of processing through it. So yeah, when you plug in an Ethernet connector to it, that is the mode that port operates now on. So Let's see here. Super Zero, will there be a GH5.3, a GH6.2, or are they going with a GH7 and GH8, etc.? Even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to tell you. And I know you've been around on these streams long enough that you probably guessed what my response would be to that question. But yeah, even if I did know, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. Sacred City, you know what's unfortunate about front-loading content for social media? It's beginning to seep into movies, so they need an action beat, and then they'll do something like a flashback. Content consumption across the board, no matter what level you're looking at, whether it's social media or you're looking at, blockbuster films, all of it has changed. There's a really nice interview, a really good interview, I think, that Matt Damon gave about how movies used to be made as far as cadence goes. And in that case, he was talking about the process of how money was made on movies versus now, where you're not really seeing movie theater and you're not really seeing then digital, copy deliveries for Blu-ray and DVD and VHS and all that kind of stuff. So all of this stuff has also changed, and it's the same when it comes to the capture side. You start to look at the way stories need to be told. It's because we have such great access to pretty much anything we would ever want online. It does pose a challenge for the type of content, but I think there's been some amazing content out there, amazing filmmaking and photography and social content that's been created that I think can skirt that line really well. I think as long as we all have a relatively open mind as to understanding that if we're working in this industry to deliver, what a client asks for and make money off of that, the kind of adage of the client's always right, in some cases it actually still does reign pretty true. If a client wants something specific and you're getting money for it, and that's what they're paying for. We don't always necessarily have to like the work that we provide, as long as we like it maybe creatively or stylistically. The storylines are always changing these days. So JC says, I love these streams. Thank you. And I see Camera Conspiracy switch back to Lumix. With the GH6 is a big compliment to your engineering. He's a very critical and he's back. I did see that. That is really cool. The GH6 is a fun camera. I think as more and more people use it and understand how the system works, I think we're seeing a lot of really cool results now that, more people are using it, more people are understanding how this camera is different than the previous generations of cameras that we've come out with in the past. All right. So, outside of that, we're just past the time for the streams today. So, thank you everybody for tuning in and hearing Johnny's interview. It was a lot of fun recording that and being able to provide another point of view to everybody here in the chat. Thank you all so much for the comments and the questions that you've been putting in the chat. Again, like I always say, these are some of the most fun I have during the week, is just having these conversations with everybody. We will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I forget what the topic is next week, but we will have that posted shortly. We're just gonna keep on going with these streams and informational information. Wow, that shows you the kind of place my brain is right now. So next week's stream is gonna be really fun. We're probably not gonna have another interview for a couple of weeks on the stream, so we're gonna be a little more tech heavy over the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in the more tech side of things, definitely take a look. If you liked the content, if you liked this conversation in the community, and you feel that that the channel deserves it, please give us a like. If you know someone who would like these conversations or like to jump in and wants answers to questions they have, let them know about these broadcasts. Like I said, we do these every Thursday at 2 p.m. And they're a lot of fun. So with that, everybody, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. And we'll see you next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care.